This is Tru Thoughts. I'm Robert Louis and joined by Nadia and Georgia, aka MELONYX, and that's the right way to pronounce it, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Hello, how are you?
We're good.
I was saying MELONYX for a long while, and I've learned how to say it properly now. So yeah. So we're going to have a little chat about we've just released your album Soul Power on Tru Thoughts, and we're just going to have a little chat with you, just I guess talking about your journey, the roots of where you're from in your music journey, and about the album in general, and just what has happened to get you to this point now with a brilliant album that even Elton John is big enough, which is quite an amazing journey. So yeah.
Still can't believe that one.
So maybe I mean we could start with how we first met and then go backwards a little bit, because I first saw you perform at the first We Out Here festival that Giles Peterson did, and I know Joe Buddha, and you're part of. Well, you were quite connected with Joe, aren't you, in Nottingham? And you were performing, was it a Nottingham-based thing at We Out Here at the time? I can't remember what it was.
I think they got in touch with local promoters in different cities to book local acts as well as the lineup that they'd curated. So I think there were a couple of promoters they approached in Nottingham, and that's how we ended up getting on the bill through them putting us forward.
Yeah. So look, I'll be honest, I didn't really know you, but I knew Dougie, and Dougie said, it's a festival, just come and watch. And I'm like, yeah, I'll come and support, because we've worked with Dougie before. He produced Harley Blue, and I've known him for a little while. And then when I saw you perform on stage, I was like, oh wow, because I hadn't really seen too many sort of soul R&B duos from the UK, and you just sounded amazing with all your harmonies. And I did I approach you straight away after the gig about trying to chat? I think I might have done.
Messaged us on IG, so you did give it some. There was some etiquette there with the timing, I would say.
Okay, all right.
You got the festival out of the way, and then you messaged us both directly, and we're very happy to hear from you.
Yeah, we weren't actually an official duo at that time, so we were singing together. We had been for like maybe a year or so, just for support really. And then so we didn't have the name MELONYX or anything then. When you saw us, it was Georgia Copeland and Nadia Latoya. That's how we were billed. And then when you messaged us and were interested in hearing some demos and having a chat, I think then we have a chat? I think we
did have a chat.
And then after, I think you were just saying, it doesn't have to be fully sorted, it can be demos. And then that's when, because you were really the one with the link with Joe Buddha, weren't you? I hadn't worked with Joe before. So then Nadia approached Joe about putting some stuff together with us. And then, that's how it kind of moved on from there.
Yeah, I was just looking at the because I remember messaging you, so I just checked the Instagram DMs, and there's me messaging you. I think I'm trying to seem quite cool, but I'm quite desperate to talk to you because I was about to go on holiday and I didn't want it hanging over. So I was just thinking, and then you said, maybe we can chat before we went before I went away. Okay, so that was it. And I guess that I think, as you say, that I recall, so you were sort of doing your individual songs, but you were doing backing vocals for each other, weren't you? So
and then we'd like collaborate on a cover, so we'd learn a cover together, and then we'd do bits of that, and that would form the performance that we gave.
So that was August 2019, wasn't it? And then so I lose track with lockdown, because that's quite a blur to me what's going on. So when was lockdown? Was that 2020?
It was March 2020.
Right.
That was when we was just like getting our feet on the ground with like MELONYX. So we had the name, we had the demos, we were waiting, like it was in post-production bits. We were just sorting out the paperwork with yourselves and stuff like that. And then we had this sold out gig to perform at New Art Exchange, and no one was there because they just announced that that Monday there was going to be a lockdown.
Right.
Peak was on the Friday. Lockdown was going to happen on the Monday, and everybody was just not about it. There was about 10 people there. It was supposed to be 60. It was still nice. It was intimate, but it was not what we expected. And yeah, then it was just anxiety ensuing after that. I was like, oh my gosh, what about the music?
Yeah. So was everything recorded by then? Was the EP done?
I think it was, for the most. Probably still in post-production, so maybe some mixing and bits and production things to add. But I think we recorded everything by that point.
Okay. And then we put out the first single May 2021. So we were still, I guess it was that lockdown up and down thing going on maybe by then, wasn't it? So yeah. So I mean, as I said, a lot of that's all a big blur to me, and I can't quite remember what's going on. But I guess the interesting thing that we found, even with all of that going on, because I think what we initially did is, from our side, I felt you could be an album act for us, but I know it takes a lot to get an album together. So I think we initially just signed you to do like an EP, wasn't it? And partly with that is just to see, look, do we get on? Are we working well together? You know, are you happy with us? Are are we happy with you? And then I remember when we. I occasionally, when I have something that I think it's really good, but I can be in my own head. Occasionally, I do send something to Mr. Scruff because I know I really trust his opinion. And when we had all of that finished, I sent him your EP because I just said, look, what do you think? Because I know he's really honest, and there's so much soul in R&B out there. You can really get lost in thinking, because we're just dealing with you, okay, you begin to be biased about it. And he was like, oh, Rob, this is really good. He was like, okay, this is good then. And then I think that's the one thing that we saw. We almost saw that immediate. I mean, it's not like you get 1 million plays on Spotify or the world stops and everybody, you do it. But we just saw that real honest reactions were coming back from just a good variety of people just straight away. As soon as we sent this out, people were just connecting with you. And I think there's something about what you're writing about, what you're doing. There's a definitely deeper aspect, isn't there, with the lyric writing of what's going on. And I feel that really was connected maybe partly with lockdown going on as well, energy and all of those things, just relating.
I hope so.
I
think we'll definitely take ourselves seriously as writers, and
sorry, that made me laugh.
Or maybe not.
No,
I'm joking.
I say that Nadia is the right. I mean, we both write.
I was gonna say
I don't take myself seriously as a writer, if I'm being totally honest.
And I say that she absolutely should. But we digress. But I think we do put a lot of thought into the concepts that we write on. We're very careful. We don't want to be like cliche. We don't want to be writing about the same old things all the time. We want to write from somewhere that's honest and genuine as well, from our experiences. So if that is what people are connecting with, then that's
great.
So who, with that in mind, like, what are the artists that you feel like are an influence with, like, keeping that sort of standard about what you're writing about? Who are the artists that you feel have influenced that process of what you do, or that you enjoy or like?
I think we'd always go for the legends, the queens, the Laurens, Jills, Ericas of the world, but just anyone who's got something significant saying it. Solange, we were just listening the other day that we really feel like there's some, obviously we're not putting ourselves on that like level, but like the things that she writes about and the way that she writes, we identify and relate to that.
I think from the UK, I'd say Cleo Sol and Ego LMA. I find their writing to be really honest and vulnerable, which is something I like in music. And I think in terms of writing from a place of honesty and having strong messages, like Nadia said at the beginning, Lauryn Hill, I mean, that Miseducation album is just going to continue living on. We went to see the 20 years of Miseducation. We went to see Baduism at
20 and 25.
20 and 25 years. And it's because, I mean, they're amazing. They really we just saw Jill Scott the other week.
23 years of who is Jill Scott.
And they all obviously have amazing voices, bring a lot in terms of stage presence. But I think what they've written about, the people that were there when the album came out or were listening to their mum while their mum was listening to it, they really clung on to that. So I think that's, in terms of what people are writing about and how they approach topics, I'd say those are some of the people that inspire us for those reasons. I mean, obviously we're not putting ourselves beside
Yeah,
but yeah.
But, you know, that's classic music, and I think it's classic because the messages in the music stand the test of time.
Yeah.
And I think that comes across with what you're doing. You're very passionate about music. I mean, you do your radio show, and I love that you do that quite regularly as well, because it's like, to me, it's just always reflecting there. There's a bigger part of what you're doing. You are singer-songwriters, but you enjoying that passion of sharing music and letting people know other music, not just, obviously as a label, we want you to plug your own music as you do a radio show, but you're very much...
We definitely do, but we like to push other music and artists that we're really into as well. So
I think for me, the radio show was important. At first, it did start out just as a great opportunity to plug MELONYX, but I do like the thought of us being able to champion not up and coming, because not everybody that we played is up and coming, but like new music, because I know that sometimes people can get caught in a time capsule with music, and they not always susceptible to hearing new things. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people who are big now. G and I were listening to them like when they were just putting out an EP, and then and no one was bothered, and then like SZA, for example. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's blown up, but when I was listening to that 2 years before that came out, my sister didn't have a clue. Now she's SZA all day. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's nice to let people know that there's quality music coming from like all levels all the time, and you don't have to just stay in the 90s or the noughties if that's the kind of like R&B or soul that you like. There are people still making music that's just as good as quality as that right now.
And I think that's one thing that I think people love to say, oh, they don't make music like they used to.
When they do,
obviously we're in R&B soul then, so we hear a lot of people talking about, oh, people don't do soul music no more, people don't do R&B, and it's like, well, actually there's a lot of people, and in the UK as well, because I feel like people love to say that about the UK, but there's so many good soul and R&B artists out there at the moment. I mean,
what they mean is major labels and mainstream radio don't promote it, because there is, and I hear that about hip hop. When I see for some, why is this there? It's only because the mainstream, but there are avenues you can find this. Yeah, listen to your show. People need to do. They're moaning about that. That's where you'll find out, isn't it? So, we obviously get press releases and everything together. It was quite fascinating. I was reading the press releases from the first one of when we were putting out your music to the most recent one, and it's quite a journey that we almost have when we sign a new artist and it's a debut artist, they haven't had music. We're trying to look for little stories about, what can maybe help us engage with an audience to understand who you are as artists, to just get people. There's so much music out there to get people to engage, and it's amazing. We didn't have too many names to name drop about people who've supported you, but the most recent press release has like a huge list of names, which I'm going to say now. This list is pretty impressive. Elton John, Rampage, Craig Charles, DJ Ace One Extra, Tony Melville, Jazz FM, Jam Supernova, China Moses, Jazz FM, Hugh Morgan, Mr. Scruff, Domu, Terry Walker, just to name a few. It's like a good mixture of people that are really into what you're doing. But when we were first working with you, one of the things we did mention about was that you've got a history, you were doing youth projects. Is that right, to encourage artists? Is that something that you were both doing?
Yeah, so during lockdown, we were invited to give a workshop for someone who saw us perform at Chip Shop when Terry Walker put us on for her Melting Pot Live. Her name's Michelle, and she invited us to do Lambeth Unlocked, and the audience was young people who wanted to get into music or music events or management. And we were giving them our perspective from the artists, our view from the artist's perspective about that. Yeah. So, and we did another one for a local promoter in Nottingham as well, called Rastarella on songwriting and stuff. So yeah, we've been invited to do things like that.
Yeah, okay.
We're always looking for opportunities to do things like that, because we do want to give back to those coming up behind us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And how do you feel? What's your journey been to get to the point? So when we at the start we were talking that you were both solo artists and performing. Were you trying to get solo deals? Had you been releasing music, self-releasing music? What was your journey up until that point that you were at We Out Here and then I saw you perform? Had you? Yeah.
I think we've been working on solo music. I hadn't really released much, to be honest. I didn't ever feel like I was getting to the point where I was ready to release stuff, which I think is part of the reason. Well, and then, yeah, so I've been doing the gigging circuit, been working on stuff. I used to write a lot to J Dilla beats, and that's kind of like how I was getting my first set of music out. And then I worked with a few different producers in Nottingham, actually, all of who were amazing. But I think I just wasn't ready to put out music yet. And I wasn't really ever quite satisfied with what I was making. And also, I wasn't really feeling like I was moving forward the way that I wanted to. So then I decided I wasn't actually going to do music anymore. And yeah, I don't want to speak for Nadia, but I know that the catalyst for us both working together was the fact that we both kind of had this period where we're like, we're not sure if we want to do this anymore. And the promoter actually asked us to work together on putting on a set at one of her events. And that kind of brought me back into it anyway. But I'll let you speak for your own personal journey.
Kind of similar, yeah. I'd say up until, I feel like everything I was doing up until MELONYX was just development, really, in hindsight. I was trying for a long time to find my feet in the industry. I studied music in London. I was gigging the scene in Nottingham. I was making music with producers, whoever I could get together with. We've done Nottingham's only small, so there's like a handful of studios that you go to as a musician when you want to try and make it in this business or whatever. We did all that. Started to find out about things like BBC Uploader, and so I probably put out like one tune before, maybe two before MELONYX. And yeah, it just seemed like I was just making music for a long time and not really doing anything with it, and it just felt like an uphill battle that I was just tired of doing, to be honest. Yeah, I just felt like, how long can I like keep chipping away at this?
And maybe we're down talking ourselves a bit, because I think we both had not little bits of success, but like I know that you had a track that was on rotation in One Extra, didn't you? Like I did something with an electronic duo called One Bomb. We were on BBC Introducing at Glastonbury 1 year with them. So we'd done bits, but I think personally we weren't maybe satisfied with what we were doing, and I think there was a lot of confidence building that still needed to happen. So we both got a lot of unreleased music that if we look back at now, we'd probably be like, you know what, something can be done with this, but I just don't think we were ready for a number of reasons.
I think for me, I ended up just letting some of my music that was unreleased, I ended up shopping it for for catalogue music, which I'm not mad at, because now I get my little royalties every now and again for that, and that's nice. But yeah, in terms of like as an artist in my own right, yeah, I don't feel like I was getting to where I wanted to be at the rate I wanted to see myself get there.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's very hard work, isn't it? And I mean, in a way, I think they're almost these little journeys that take place, and you don't know why they happen. And you know, for want of I mean, I always look back with Tru Thoughts, because when I launched the label, I didn't really have much music that I could sign, and I was trying to sign people in Brighton. Most people wanted to sign to Skin or Catskills and didn't want to sign to me, who I knew, who were friends. And then just before I'd set the deadline that we put out the compilation, a friend who was on the compilation said, "Oh, I know this guy and he's trying to get his music, but no one's signing it." And that was Bonobo, and he sent his music. And now we ended up putting that a song on that compilation. Then I asked everybody, there was 4 artists that we had, I said, can you do as an album? No, but everybody said yes, but he was the only one. I've got an album. And I always think, you know, I'd set this deadline, and if it was a few days later, I would have gone to manufacture. I wouldn't have been able to have that song on there. And I wonder, you know, that could have been Tru Thoughts. You know, maybe it might not have been, but there are always these little things, isn't it? But I always think that, like, and especially for you, these are part of, you know, the 10,000 hours you're doing all of this thing. And I think you've got to have those ups and downs within music. And even when you get to levels, and you see artists with longer careers, they reach points where they're like, oh, I've got to this point and I thought it would all be easier. But then when you're at that point and you've got, you know, a band of 10, and then it's not the right equipment on a huge stage where you still got to go and perform, there's another nightmare that goes on, isn't it? Whereas, you know, when you're on the hustle, you sort of go, oh, I'll deal with it. There's 100 people there, we'll make it work and all of that. But then, but yeah, it's interesting. But so you both got to a point. But I think with people like you, I sort of feel you've got this inside you. There's something inside your nature that you're potentially always going to be doing music, whether it's coming out on a label, whether it's there, whether you're singing to friends and family.
Yeah, we have had this conversation before, to be honest. It's like it's always like we are not choosing music is choosing us.
Yeah.
So we keep getting drawn back. And I think what the good thing about MELONYX is that it helped us to realize that it's better to just stay consistent and just crack on, because I'm sure there's probably been times during MELONYX where we've had ups and downs.
Definitely.
But if we'd let them like overcome us, I don't think we'd be seeing like the great things that we're seeing today.
Exactly. And I think it's hard as well, because I think you think once you get, so when you messaged us, we were like, oh my God, something's happening. We're gonna, Rob knows our name. And then you were like, oh yeah, we like the project. We're like, oh my God, this is happening. And then you kind of get past these little milestones, but what you thought it was gonna be like or represent, it kind of does, but then you're like, oh, not that it isn't good, but do you get what I mean?
It's not how you expected it to look.
More to do kind of thing. So I know for me, there was a lot of anxiety around putting out the first EP. There was a lot of anxiety around putting out this album. Didn't necessarily feel like we were ready for an album. And even now, I've had anxiety today about, oh my God, like, is the album doing enough? So I think for us anyway, we won't speak for other artists, but I think for me personally, it's quite normal to have those ebbs. Like, I'm not sat here on this couch today thinking, oh, world domination. I'm just like, it's going to be what it's going to be. We can only do what we're going to do. And hopefully people are, you know, hopefully we will stick in this thing. We'll see.
I'm sure a lot of the Tru Thoughts artists get annoyed with me, because I'm always saying it's when the album comes out, then we're looking a year after that date to just really judge and see what's going on. And that isn't even about numbers. That's just saying, look, have you managed to get gigs? Are you performing well at the gigs? Are there some interesting people supporting you? And interesting people doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't, look, it's great Elton John's played you, but I think also what is really important to remember, that message that you get from somebody who just like, I love it when I play a tune on the radio and someone goes, that song, I loved it. And that might be a drum and bass tune. It might be a proper soul tune. And I love getting those messages from people that are just like, they're really, and that's just me as a DJ. And I think it's always important. I know we can get lost in what the numbers on Spotify and what that, but I think with what you do and what we see so much, and we've seen that within Tru Thoughts, is you're just building fans. And we saw that at Love Supreme as well, because you were on quite early at Love Supreme. And we were, you know, okay, it's going to be quiet. And then when I came, Paul was like, people have come to watch MELONYX, you know, they've come to watch you, and it's a busy festival. And at Love Supreme, there's a lot of competition, even early on in the day. But so it's like, okay, you've got fans already.
Oh, woman, I can't lie, because when we came, the bar was barely set up. That's how early we were on.
And you know what? I do like that Paul really, he tempered our expectations.
Yes,
he kept being like, we don't know if anyone's going to be there, but at least you'll be on the lineup.
Yes.
We don't know if anyone's going to be there. And we're like, you know what? We know what to expect.
Yes.
And I'm glad we didn't go in. And I don't think we would have anyway, because we know that we're just growing. So we're not ever expecting to turn up and it's like, oh, MELONYX is here. Like, you know, but it was nice to see that people did want to check us out or heard us and decided to stay for the set. So that was nice. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that's the bit. I mean, the one thing I know with the artists that we work with that have got this like certain artists just have a little spark. They're very motivated and hungry, but also they're very clear on a creativity point. And I think that's one of the things that I've loved working with you about. You're quite really, in a good way, serious about the music and the quality of what is coming out there and what the level is. Even when we're discussing with remixes, I'm sometimes having, you know, because I sort of understand maybe or looking at something in a different way to you, but we're having quite detailed conversations about what's going on. And I remember Rampage, Maurice from Rampage, when because you did a track with Rampage and Zed Bias, didn't you? There was, and it was like a party tune for Notting Hill Carnival. But when I was chatting with Maurice, and he was like, "Oh yeah, MELONYX were really about what's this about the lyrics? It's like, you know, it's not that deep going on." And he was like, "Oh, you know, I didn't know what to do." But I think he was thinking, "Oh, I'm having to deal with something that, you know, is a bit hard." But he'd spoken to you and got you to like figure out where they were coming from. But for me, I was like, oh, I'm really like that you're questioning, why are you making us do just straight up party lyrics or something? We don't have to do that, even if it's Notting Hill. And I think that bit is the bit that you, I guess what you're trying to do. And I don't know what your journeys are with working with, you know, sometimes as jobbing singers, what we've seen is, you know, people want you to come on and just, I've got this instrumental, come and do a banger. They're maybe not listening to the lyrics you're doing, but you've got this quite good quality control that you're trying to do with everything you're doing. And not everybody does that. And also not everybody does that early on in their career. And I think that's a really taking a long-term approach to what you're doing, which I think is why very much people are connecting with your music. Is that, I guess, I probably know the answer to that. That's not a deliberate thing. That's just within you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I think we just want to do everything for the right reason. So I don't think either of us would do something that we're not feeling just because, like we said about what we write, we just want the whole thing about MELONYX is we want to stay true to ourselves. So it wouldn't feel right to just do something for the sake of, let's just get this out there, it's a good name, and stuff. So we just want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to have to hear it play in places. We might have to perform it. So I just don't think it makes sense if you're not actually into what you've done. But I think on that particular occasion, we were perhaps being a little precious in the beginning. And when we went back and reflected, we were like, no, actually, this is okay. But which is why it's good to speak to people about it as well. Because you do, like when we spoke to you about the remixes, you know, sometimes you can't always go just from what you think. Like, obviously, we're always going to keep that at the forefront because it's important how we feel about the music, but it's nice to get like an outside gauge. And I think luckily for us, the people that we've worked with so far, like yourselves, like Maurice, you're people whose opinion we trust as well. So we don't ever feel like you're trying to steer us in the way of just trying to get a one-hit wonder or a banger. So if you guys kind of say, maybe consider it, we will genuinely go back and see how we feel about it and then come to a decision. But yeah, I think it's a fair point.
Yeah. We'll be happy with what we've done, what's out there presents us, doesn't it? So that's what it comes down to.
And for me, I think one of the good things about working with you, although I guess I'm technically credited as an A&R, a lot of the artists we work with, I'm not having to heavily A&R because they're, and I put you both in that category, you're good at A&Ring your own music, you've got a quality control threshold, like you know, just getting everything together. You've had Joe Buddha help you within that, but I feel, I mean, do you feel that like there's a few different producers on the album, the album's like a solid sort of piece of work? How did that process work for you? Was it just a question of recording loads of things, or was there a concept of actually doing an album and an album concept for this album?
I don't know if I would say that was a concept to begin with, if I'm honest.
Yes.
Remember, we would have been happy to put out another EP. So everything, I think, with Soul Glow happened quite organically. We just did what we usually do, which is write from a place of truth. And we started to see a thread emerging through the tracks. And as we saw that formed the story, the concept, sort of the image that we had for the final body of work, I would say.
And it helped us narrow it down, because there were a lot of things that we did do that weren't on this album, that we're not necessarily saying weren't good enough. They just, I think we'll maybe go back to some of the ideas when making new music, or just make things from scratch. But yeah, I think once we started the process of creating in the normal way, which we do, we started to, as a team, it's me and Nadia, Joe, and all the other producers in the camp, start to think, okay, yeah, this one will work, and actually these ones work well together, and we can see now what the thread is. But because we'd never done that process before, it really was like a journey, and that we were kind of learning on the job. I mean, Dougie's done it before, and he kept just being like, yeah, man, it's going to be fine. You know what Joe Bruder's like, he obviously is very seasoned, as are you. So he was just like, it's good, like, because there was a lot of doubt from me about whether, have we got a theme here? Is it good enough? And all of these things. So I think it just was kind of just kept reflecting amongst the team to see where we were. And then, yeah, I think it came together in the end, but it was definitely a journey, I would say.
And a brilliant, I mean, for a debut album, it's really good. And I mean, I constantly say that. I know Joe Dougie says the same. It's like, it's just getting everything together, because, you know, you learn as you put out an album. And I think that's the key, is once you get that first one out, I mean, I think it's very rare, but particularly on an indie level, to, you know, just doing a debut album that has everything in there. But I think debut albums can often be the best, because there's everything that you've learned from being a child into music up until this point that goes into that album. And then although second and third albums can be more like, the quality is there, there's a real charm, I always feel, with a debut album that has got all of that personality, which is, I think, I feel for this album, it very much reflects what I know about you and what you're about as artists. And I think it's done really well. And I think we can see already the reflection of what's going on with, you know, requests for gigs. You just, you know, you played the Jazz Cafe, you really rocked it in Love Supreme. You've had Sleaford Mods ask you to support for them as well. And I love that you messaged us about that, and I was like, if you're up for it, I really think it's important to do. And you're like, yeah, we're up for it. You weren't scared about, I'm going to be in a different audience. Like, what was your feeling when they?
I was going to say, I don't know if we weren't scared, but we're definitely going to give it a go.
Yeah, I still am scared, but I'm like, whatever. Yes, it's either we'll go one of a few ways, won't it? Like, they've asked us, and I think we asked you. You guys thought it was a good idea to take it on, so it's like, okay, well, let's go there and do our thing, and I guess we'll just see what happens. But it's really nice to be asked. Obviously, they're amazing, they're very established. It's a great venue as well, being at the O2 in Birmingham. We've not played Birmingham before, so there's just a lot more tick boxes than there is to outweigh, I think, both of the whatever you would call scared or fear about it. But yeah, I don't know how it's going to be received. I could not tell you, but
at the very least, it's going to be character building. So.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, this is the bit. I mean, I've done this many a time with DJ gigs, but for me, I just always, I want to be in any place at any time. I just want to convince people to like the music, and I can take like a barrage of bad stuff if, you know, people come and got any more commercial music. But if I'm feeling, look, I'm getting some people in that audience are going to ask me, oh, what you do, what's the label? It's always about winning that. And I think that's what I liked about you. We're just sort of brave enough, like, we'll tackle a different audience. And I think nowadays, I think it's the benefit of the services like Spotify and Apple Music, is people are just a little bit more open to music, aren't they? And I mean, I don't know Sleaford Mods. I find them brilliant when I see them on social media and their political commentary, but what they are about is to sort of be quite open-minded, and they don't like people being too rude. And like, it feels like to me a natural fit. They're from Nottingham, you're from Nottingham, and it's about, look, we're just into music, and you know, it feels like just a great opportunity. And I think it's brilliant, and again shows something about what you're doing. I think, you know, they're a band who are just about, we believe in true art form, be who you are, and they've asked you to support them, haven't they? And I think that's great for you to do. With your, you know, while we were doing this album, and, you know, going back to sort of lockdown, and I guess the Black Lives Matter movement became quite big there. That sort of probably affected a lot of people in different ways. How do you feel? I mean, you know, you're female Black artists within the music industry. Do you know, have you had experience that you feel has been quite negative with that, or do you feel things have changed since that sort of moment of lockdown where Black Lives Matter sort of came into the music industry? I mean, it was hit and miss for me. At the moment, you sing, it almost seems to be forgotten about in certain areas. It felt like there was going to be a positive thing, but it feels like there's certain elements that it's business as usual going on. What's been your experience like? You were quite new when we first started working with you. I wonder if you've seen any changes or noticed any changes, or.
That's a good question.
Yeah, go.
I don't know. I think for me, sometimes these issues are quite sometimes your experience when you're, you know, part of the marginalized group, so to speak, can be very insidious. So it's like it's like on reflection, it's like, what was that about? Was it about that kind of thing? Do you know what I mean? And I think that is something that's going to take a long time to rectify. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if there's ever going to be a point in my career where I'm not going to wonder, oh, was I experiencing some type of microaggression there, or was that person just not very nice? I didn't know if I could play music. Do you know what I mean? I think
that's quite indicative of the UK as well, I will say, about how marginalized communities are treated. I think things aren't overt over here. A lot of it's covert, and it's like looking back and thinking, yeah, that was definitely off key, actually.
Yeah.
And because I think a lot of the time in the moment, you can't always process when you're being treated unfairly, because you're just there to do what you're doing. And then you might think, you know what, why am I getting this energy back when we're just asking for what we were promised, or whatever? So I think it's really hard to pinpoint and say, yeah, I've had this experience and I know it was because of this, especially because we're women and we're Black. Do you know what I mean? So they're kind of, there's that intersectionality there where obviously there's a whole thing of women in music and how we're treated anyway, and then being Black women in music on top of that. So I mean, I think there seems to be an effort for there to be change. People kind of do talk to us about it, probably because of what our music is about. Like when we have interviews with people and ask us our opinions, I'd still say there's a long way to go, because I think whenever you want like real significant change, you have to have the people who need that change at the forefront of making it. And I don't think we're quite there yet in this industry and many others. But yeah, I think I agree with Nadia in that there's definitely been things where we've looked back and thought, yeah, I don't know what that was about, and you try and decipher it. And sometimes that takes a lot of energy. Like, so it can just be about being like, well, we stood our ground, and I guess if we get that vibe again, maybe we'll then say, obviously when you know it in the moment, you can address it. But as I say, the things can be so insidious was the word you use, that you can't always identify it in the moment. And you also don't want to give it too much of your energy, because at the end of the day, we are going to take up space and we're going to do what we're doing. And if people don't deal with us the way that they should, we're going to say something as respectfully and nicely as possible, because we're nice people. At the same time, you know, we value what we're doing, we value ourselves, and I think it would be fair for us to say that we always operate above board. You know, we make it our business to make sure that we operate respectfully, we deliver what we say we're going to deliver. So whenever we do feel that kind of energy, we will tackle it head on, as and when we've got the energy to do so.
I think as our profile hopefully grows, it will get easier to do things. I think when you're in the building block stage of your career, you can feel voiceless sometimes. I think I think that's probably the way that I would say that I experience it. Sometimes I don't feel empowered to have those conversations that I know that really ought to have took place. sometimes because of not wanting to rock the boat or something, but I do think we are good at, like, you know, reflecting, saying, and trying to find a way to say what we need to say, even if it doesn't bear any fruit. We know that we've named something, we've named a situation, and we can just shake the dust off our sandals, so to speak, on that and keep it moving. And I think it's very much an ethos for me, and I'd like to say MELONYX, to just go where the love is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And we identify who the genuine, real, kind people are, and we try and forge rapport and relationships with those people and just keep it moving and leave the negativity.
Yeah, and I would say we've been quite fortunate in that, even though we've had maybe some situations that have been a bit, I don't know, off key, for lack of a better word. You know, we're working with you guys, a label who've been, you know, really open to how we want to do things, and where there's a good rapport. We're working with Joe Buda, so we had a lot of support from the likes of Terry Walker, another Black woman in music who has a lot of experience. So I think it seems like our path is just naturally pushing us towards people who resonate with what we're about, and therefore we're probably getting, most of the time, the treatment that we deserve, and we're in the places where people want to receive us. We're not often finding ourselves in a place where we don't feel like we belong necessarily. I think because we're, just how you said with the quality of music, I think we're very much like, we won't just go somewhere to be there. We go where we feel comfortable and where we feel like what we're doing is going to resonate. So yeah, I think, but I would still say, regardless of all of that, that there's still a ways to go. And I think the best way to do it is by speaking to those people and asking what is needed, and putting those people at the forefront of projects and in more positions, so that they can actually actively affect change, because you won't get it by doing a top-down approach.
Definitely.
I think, I mean, one of the things, I mean, I was a lot trying to tell all our artists is a point with, when the Black Lives Matter thing was going on in the UK, it's like, we've got an opportunity, everybody's got an opportunity now to speak up, where before, I know even for me, like my background South Asian, I was sometimes a bit nervous. I can be a bit mouthy and get a bit frustrated, and I'm happy to sometimes on social media just speak up about things and talk about things that I find frustrating to do with racism and all of that. I don't mind doing that, and I'm in a privileged position because I co-own the record label. Paul, my business partner, is really supportive of my personal opinions, and you know, I'm allowed to express them. I think at the moment it does still feel that it is important to speak up when you get the chance and talk to other people and say, look, I've felt something's happened. And it's interesting what you said, Nadia, about you hold those things for a while, because I know when the label first started, because it was before the internet, a lot of people didn't know what I looked like. So my name being Robert Louis, is the Louis is Goa, and Goa was part of Portuguese colony, so it's a Portuguese name. So people didn't know. I think a lot of people may have presumed I was white and didn't know. So I would go quite often to meetings, and people would be visibly shocked to see me, and you could almost see on their face, and they don't say anything, but they were expecting me to be white. And I used to sort of joke about it afterwards, going, oh yeah, and it's all right. And there was only a few people who'd ever, I remember Blade, when I first met him, he's going, oh, are you from India? And I was like, yeah, my background's in India. And I remember Phil Asher doing the same, just asking me and just being very open. But there was this little bit of a reaction. And and that took me so long to process when Black Lives Matter was going on. I was like, I shouldn't have really been joking about that. That's not great, is it? I was made to feel a little bit awkward, and you could visibly see people reacting. But I guess that's the stuff that we have to deal with and continues to go on. But I think now I feel I'm a bit older now. I'm maybe a bit, I could probably be a bit more articulate, or I'd even maybe email somebody afterwards and say, look, you may not have meant to do that, but this is how you were, just made me feel a bit uncomfortable. And I think to try and get an understanding, I think that's the opportunity for a lot of people. They don't necessarily, I think they may not be racist like Nigel Farage racist, but they're doing something that is maybe they're not understanding, look, that wasn't so great.
Yeah. Realize that that's racism.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a lot of the problem.
And I think, like you said, being voiceless and using your voice and taking up space. So like, we've always made a point of making a thing about when we do our track Melanin Queens, explaining why we've made the song, why we wanted to celebrate Black women, and then also inviting people to sing along with us in the song so that they understand that even though it's for us and by us, you can still celebrate somebody else and understand the need for that being there. And, you know, there's been, most times everybody's on board. There's been a couple gigs where it's been like awkward, but you have to push through, because if that's what you're about, we're here to be ourselves. We are two Black women in music, so why should we shy away from those, what we are and those messages? So I think it's just always trying to show up in those moments, because I think sometimes we, like you were just explaining, we assume that like uneasiness, when really that should sit with you, because what do I, you know, I am who I am. The fact that you had your preconceptions about who was coming here really says more about you. Do you know what I mean? You need to examine that. It's not for me to feel uncomfortable. We have had to have this talk sometimes, because we've done gigs where it's been a bit like, oh, the room is very white. Should we do Melanin Queens? Should we say why we wrote it? But then we're like, no, we're gonna always do it, no matter what the gig, no matter the audience, because we did write the tune. We still stand by the reason why we've written the tune. And that doesn't mean to say that you can't get on board with the message just because, you know, at the end of the day, we live in a society where white people are very reflected in society every day. That's why we've made a song like Melanin Queen. So I don't see what the problem is with these people getting on board. So they're the ways that we try now not to shrink ourselves and to take up space. So I think it definitely comes with practice. The more you feel comfortable.
Because it's a lot of unpicking and unlearning and relearning to do when you spent your whole life trying to assimilate. Do you know what I mean? So you have to, you have to dig deep.
And you're almost, I mean, it's interesting here you talk about that and getting everybody to sing along, because it's reminding me, for me, when I was younger as a teenager listening to Public Enemy, my white friends, and at school, we had some white people at school who were, I wouldn't say they're full-on fledgling racists, but they would maybe make those comments. And I saw they went to a Public Enemy concert and they came back after that and they totally changed, and they began to understand and the nuances of how Public Enemy were presented, which if you read interviews with Chuck D, they were figuring this out, what you're doing now. They were trying to figure out that back then, because they were saying, we want white people to listen to our music and hear our story and understand what we're doing. We're not saying only Black people should listen and buy and support our music, but they were figuring out, and in a very confrontational way with their music. It was scary, but they did it. And I think what you're doing is really beautiful, isn't it? Because you're trying to do this, and I think it's brilliant to talk about that, because you're trying to get people to understand you're just real people doing this thing, and you're trying to get people to understand. And I think that's the bit. It's great what you said. We are quite used to watching white artists and go into their world, and we may not know everything that's going on there, but we can be part of it, and we can feel welcome there. And you can do that the other way around as well, isn't it? It's not hard. You're just not maybe used to it as much. So
and maybe that's on both sides. They're not used to it, we're not used to it. But I think it's been really nice, because we've had a lot of white people come up and say, I just really thought that song was so beautiful. And then that's when it comes back to us. Like, we have to remember to be confident, because whatever we're thinking is going to happen, for the most part, doesn't, to the point where now I don't even think we think twice about going and performing that song and saying why we did it, and then getting everyone to sing along, and everyone usually is on board. So I think it's just normalizing those things, I think.
I think going back to the example that you gave us about Public Enemy, I think that's why it's quite important for music to have a message. I know it's supposed to be like for uplifting and all sorts of an array of emotions and stuff, but music is a really accessible way of educating people. And that's why those people that you went to school with were able to be, I feel like a lot of the time, these discriminations and prejudices, it's a lack of education, it's lack of exposure. Do you know what I mean? So the more you can get people to relate, and the more you can stand in your truth in your music and reach those audiences, the more likely you're going to be able to give someone a perspective that they didn't have before, make them reconsider how they think about the world.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. So, yeah, I mean, it's been such a fascinating journey. I mean, one of the things I was asking everybody, just a reminder of all the different things that happened, because quite a lot's happened on your journey for us to get this album out. And you did a LL Cool J cover for Rampage on MELONYX, which went viral on TikTok. And I'm not in TikTok, even though I've got a TikTok, I don't really know what to do on there. So, what did you notice? I mean, how was that? That's another part of the industry, social media and all of that. Like, how do you find all of that as artists? You know, as artists, also, I guess as female artists, there might be a more of a pressure that, you know, do you post pictures of yourself? I mean, for me, as a DJ, I can be quite nerdy. There's no expectation for me to post a photo of myself. I can just post a picture of a record and everybody's quite happy with that. Do you have these different type of expectations with social media, or you just do what you want and you're quite happy with how it's gone? How are you feeling with all these different things there?
I think there definitely is expectation, and I think there is more so on women to present an image, but I think that we try and, I mean, don't get me wrong, we try and make ourselves look presentable, but also I think we're quite active about the fact that we don't want to present some sort of perfection that we can't keep up. Like, we're not going to look perfect every time you see us, just because that's not our vibe, that's not who we are. Like,
in life,
I'm
like, a very low maintenance person.
Exactly. So we just feel it's better to come as we are, because more time, if you see us on the street, this is the version of MELONYX that you're going to see. There's no point in trying to, but you know what, fair play to the ones that can be doing up, you know, 10 every day, but
and get ready with me. Like, do you know how long it was before I realized what GRWM stood for?
Yeah,
like, I ain't got time to get myself ready. Never mind, get myself ready and let you watch. But it's funny, like, that pressure about image is such a thing, because just before we started this interview, I was like, oh my god, I need to put some lipstick on or something. And I almost asked you at the beginning, Rob, like, can you just give me 2 seconds to just go and put some lippy on before we start recording? But I just thought, this is my face.
Real, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so,
but yeah, I think it's quite hard generally, the social media thing. I really respect the artists who are really on it and they're always creating content and they find ways to make it interesting. Like, you know, we try and do the little that we can. And I'm
not gonna lie, sometimes I enjoy it. Like, every now and then I do want to get dolled up, do you know what I mean? But I don't want it to be something, I just don't want it to be something that I feel like I have to do. So,
and just, I'm talking generally in terms of making content. It's not always that easy to do it, to stay on top of, like, make sure you post this many times a week. I mean, I don't know what the outward view is, but I'd say we try and post, but also we're probably not always going to be as consistent as we could be, just because it is hard work. It's like another job in itself. We haven't quite got the hang of TikTok, if I'm being totally honest. So when that thing happened with the LL Cool J, what happened is it went out on Instagram on the One Extra page, and we were tagged. I think they did it as a joint post with Rampage, and someone screen grabbed the little section and put it on TikTok, and we didn't even have a TikTok account at that time, but the person messaged us on IG and he was like, I've just posted this on TikTok and the views are just going up, they're just going up. You need to make an account and you need to post it on your own thing. And then when we got the full version, we put that up, and like, even today, I'll go on there and it'd be like, people still comment on it, still liking it, but then it's really weird because then you post other things in it. I mean, it's just like all of social media. I don't know what the algorithm's saying, and we're perhaps, I know with TikTok they say that you're supposed to post every day. That is just not manageable for us. We just can't do that. So yeah, I think it's when those things happen, or you get a video and it gets loads of attraction, it's great. But I think we try not to read into it too much, because we just can't maintain that. Like, I think, you know, if we get super successful and we have a team, we can be putting out content all the time, but you know, we still work, we're doing music, we're rehearsing for gigs, we're gigging, like, so.
And there's 2 of us, so it's not even like, if the whim takes us, we could just put something up on there, do you know what I mean? Like, everything has to be collaborated. So yeah,
but we try and do our little thing. But yeah, it's definitely a job on top of a job, I would say. So respect everybody who's able to do it so well.
Absolutely.
But I mean, we're always saying we don't want any of artists to get lost. I'd rather you be writing music and recording music and doing gigs. I think that's ultimately the
that is content for life, people.
Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting even with that, isn't it? Because with the TikTok, that was just a fan. That's not someone you know. And then they're getting in touch with you saying, go and set up a TikTok, aren't you? They're not just trying to grab everything and all the attention. I think that's
really nice.
Yeah. And that's the brilliant thing about social media, isn't it? That is the good bit about it, that natural thing. And I think, in a way, as you're saying, the MELONYX Instagram represents you, because you are, you've got busy lives away from music, and like many artists, you've got jobs, you're having to juggle, because it can be very hard to make a living from the music industry early on. It happens very rarely in indie terms that goes on. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, but I always feel like you represent yourself really well on the socials, and you're just real. And I think that's it. I think that's what I find is sometimes those overthinking. Sometimes I'll do a quite nuanced post where politics is really annoying me, that I've taken ages to write, and no one really likes it, and then Rishi Sunak said something that really annoyed me, and I've just done a rant, and that's the one that gets all the likes. And sometimes, because I think sometimes people almost know the difference between, you're just, oh god, you're going off on one now, aren't you? Rather than you being really careful about what you're writing. So.
Drama, don't they?
It's real as well. They're probably also agitated, for use of the other word that I was going to use. So when they see that, they're like, yeah, go on, Rob.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
But the good thing about social media, and I think is one story that I do want to mention, because I was reading the Marvin Abbey book about dancehall music, and I did a little post about the book, and I did a few photos of some reggae 45s, including Bounty Killer, Roots, Reality and Culture. And then that was on a Sunday, and then Nadia, you DM me on a Sunday, and I'll be honest, on a Sunday, I'm like, oh no, this is going to be about work on a Sunday, and you were like, oh, Rob, that it's reminding me of my childhood. King Jammy's my uncle, and he brought that to your house, and I was like, what? I didn't know.
Yeah.
and
it's
that's
the logo. That's why, branding's that whole thing, boy, because that logo is imprinted in my mind, because that record, I think we only had one record, and it was that record on the turntable. Do you know what I mean? We had mix, and it just brought it all flooding back.
Yeah. So King Jammy's your uncle, and you said Bounty Killer came round your place as well, yeah?
Yeah, because my uncle been touring, like he's actually on tour. He's coming over to Europe these sides in August, but he brought Bounty Killer over as a new act at the time. This was like, I'm giving my age away now, but like this is like early 90s. And they got to Knots quite late that time. I think they were doing something with V-Rocket at like Marcus Garvey or something, because that's where things used to happen, like dance hall wise in Knots. And my uncle and my mum are quite close, so he would always come and check my mum. So he'd come around, my mum would make dinner or whatever, and whatever artists he was with, obviously they would roll through too. So I had the privilege at like 5 years old of meeting this soon to be megastar. Do you know what I mean?
And it's like an amazing story. So look, I guess we probably just need to round it up now. Just to round up. I mean, you've made a journey up until this point. The album's only just recently come out, so that, there's still further to go. But if anybody is listening to this or watching this and thinking they're an artist, and they're thinking, they're in the middle of making their journey, they've probably heard what you said. What sort of advice would you give them? What positive advice would you think you've learned, I guess, since that time where you were thinking you were doing music and almost thinking to leave, to the point, which was really 4 years ago, almost exactly, to when we're talking today, that I first spoke to you before we've got an album out. What advice would you give to anybody up and coming?
I think for me, consistency is key. If you're gonna do it, keep at it. Understand that it's a long road ahead. It's not an overnight success. It takes a lot of commitment, education as well. A lot of people start music, but they don't really know what the avenues are. But you have to educate yourself, because it's not one of those industries that's straightforward. Like, you go school, you go college, you go university, and then there's a job waiting at the end. Like, you have to educate yourself on how you can build your fan base or promote your music or whatever it is that needs to be done in order for you to give yourself the best chance possible of having and maintaining a career. It's a big learning curve. It's a continual learning curve. We've learned so much just from working with you guys, do you know what I mean? And I feel privileged because of that. I don't know if I would have been taking my own advice, do you know what I mean, without the fortune of like crossing paths with Tru Thoughts. I like to think I was, because I was like proactive in the terms of like I wanted to be educated about music, so I went and studied it, do you know what I mean? But yeah, there's a lot of hats to wear, so there's a lot to teach yourself, and also I think it's quite a collaborative career as well. I don't think you can do it on your own. I think we've proven, even though we probably could have done it on our own, I definitely feel like we're seeing something beautiful now because we're doing it together. Not just me and G, but us and Buddha and Can't Stop and Tru Thoughts, do you know what I mean? Like everyone's got a part that they're playing in making this thing sort of go somewhere. That would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think just giving yourself grace as well. It's not a race. And I think try not to be too obsessed with watching. Like I regularly log out of socials, to be honest, just because I personally would be lying if I said I wasn't affected by seeing all the music come out and who's playing what music and what's really getting a buzz. Then I'm like, oh my God, does that mean this? Does that mean that? So I think it's important to kind of be aware of what's going on, because it's good to know about what's happening in the sphere that you want to be in, but not so much that you're kind of trying to follow a formula of someone else. I think just being yourself, and yeah, not putting too much into that. If you enjoy music and that's what you want to do, then just focus on doing it for the love and finding your voice and your tribe as well within music, and just keep at it, I think, because I think when you do that, you just carve your own little lane, which is important. And I think you naturally attract the people who resonate with what you're doing, which I also think is important. You don't want to get caught up in anybody else's source or what's going on, because I think those things can make you doubt yourself. So yeah, I'd just say just kind of be focused and don't share with too many. Find people that you can trust to share ideas with and get opinions from. Don't take everybody's opinion, because you know that's just too many cooks spoiling the broth or whatever they're saying. So yeah, there would be my 2 cents.
Sorry, I have one more sentence. Invest in yourself as well.
Yeah.
Invest and reinvest. Like anything that we make from MELONYX goes back into MELONYX. We barely take anything from what we earn, because we understand that it's
we invested in a good logo. Shout out Honey Williams for doing that. Like we invest in ourselves a lot, and I think sometimes people look at music, even people to us, they're like, oh God, you lot are doing this now, aren't you? I'm just like, I mean, yeah, we're doing our thing, but it's, you know, you have to put the work in and have to be willing to bet on yourself. Like you can't expect others to pour into you if you won't pour into what you're doing. So I think it's really important to do that financially and other ways as well. Just invest in what you're doing. If you want to go and learn something, put your hand in your pocket and save up and go and do that then, if that's really what you want to do. Yeah.
Brilliant advice. And I've definitely seen successful artists have done everything that you've just said. That's what they've done to get where they are. There isn't, you know, I think that's the reality. Without doing all of that, especially in the indie level, it's almost impossible to make it in the music industry, or to get a level of success as well. And yeah, but yeah, that's great. That's brilliant advice. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Actually, do you want to just quickly mention, just do a little mention of your socials, where the best place for people to keep up to date with what you're doing, and I guess any gigs that you've got coming up as well, if you want to mention those, and then we can
so I'll do the social, I'll let you do the gigs. So it's at MELONYX Music on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. If you go to our link tree as well, that's where you can find links to all our music. I'm just going to do a quick plea that if you like what we're doing, please follow us on the streaming platforms. So don't just follow us on the socials, but thanks for that, Rob. Then follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, and all those places where the music can actually be streamed and bought from. But yeah.
And if you really want to support, go buy everything on Bandcamp. Yeah. But gigs wise, we've got Kendall Calling coming up. We've got the Cosmopolitan Arts Festival in Leicester.
They're both this weekend.
Yeah. And we've got Cleethorpes, Everybody Loves the Sunshine Festival in Cleethorpes. We've got We Out Here Festival, 13th of August, we're on Big Top Stage. We've got Tru Thoughts showcase at Old Assembly in Bristol in September. And we've got Sleaford Mods, we're going to be opening for Sleaford Mods at the O2 Academy in November.
And we've got posts on our socials, so if you don't remember all of that, head over to IG where we have posted all the dates that we've got coming up.
And the albums
for the artwork.
Yeah.
And the whole team for putting out Soul Glow, which is out everywhere now.
Yeah, so go check the album, make sure you check it and tell all your friends about it as well, anybody listening to this. So yeah, thank you, George and Nadia, much appreciated. Yeah, we'll speak soon.
Thank you so much.